Well, in some Clemson circles, staying in the ACC is viable if you just kick a bunch of teams out.
You are Locked On College Football, your daily podcast on all things college football. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Locked On College Football. I'm your host, Spencer McLaughlin. Thank you so much for making this your first listen or your first view every day. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day and your daily source to stay up to date with the biggest stories in the greatest sport on planet Earth, realignment, coaching carousel, the portal, and so much more. We've always got you covered. Today's episode is brought to you by our friends at LinkedIn. Right now, these days, every new potential hire can feel like a high-stakes wager for your small business. That's why LinkedIn Jobs helps find the right people for your team faster and for free. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. Terms and conditions do apply. We'll talk about what Arizona State can do in the Big 12 because they might be able to do more than you'd think, and the biggest game on Boise State's schedule as they try to make the playoff. Do you know what it is? Well, I'm going to tell you what it is later in today's show. Let's start with Clemson, though, and their ongoing lawsuit against the ACC. No update on that particular front, but according to some that cover the Tigers, this according to John Chansey over at Rubbing the Rock, which I have to say is just a fantastic name for a Clemson coverage. It's part of the fan-sided coverage of Clemson football over there. The headline is Clemson football, 5 schools we'd like to kick out of the ACC. Okay, guys. The proposal here from Mr. Chansey, who I don't know, and I'm not pretending is a bad individual. I just think this is a particularly ludicrous take, as I will lay out. The 5 schools he proposes just getting rid of in the ACC are Syracuse, Wake Forest, Duke, Georgia Tech, and Boston College. Now, let me start with the first one I named there, Syracuse. Is this just because Syracuse has upset you a time or two recently? Because if so, I don't know if as a fan of Syracuse, as a fan of Clemson, if this is the best way to get that frustration out. Wake Forest. What did Wake Forest ever do to you? No, they haven't been great in football recently. Guess what? Vanderbilt's still in the SEC, so Wake Forest can stay in the ACC as far as I'm concerned. Duke. Oh, come on. Come on. Speaking of seeking revenge, perhaps, I don't know if that's his motive. It's just a little ironic, isn't it? Just like a little bit, maybe a little bit that Duke beat Clemson last year. I mean, this piece, which was written over the weekend, was talking about, well, Duke hasn't done anything in football recently. Well, clearly they did enough last year to beat Clemson. So how far ahead is Clemson compared to Duke right now? I think a decent amount going into 2024, but last year they were not as good. They couldn't beat them. Georgia Tech, that's the Atlanta television market. You'd be crazy to kick that out of your conference, no matter how much they've struggled. And by the way, Brent Key has got something cooking down there. I don't know if it's a conference championship contender, probably not, but at least it's something. They're making noise. They're interesting, at the very least. And Boston College. Well, it's hard to defend Boston College. I mean, sure, they almost beat top-ranked Florida State last year as Jordan Travis was healthy. Sure, they almost did that. But sure, let's kick them out of the league. So here's why this is ridiculous. Number one, and the premise of this article is also founded upon, don't add Stanford, Cal, and SMU. Number one, why this is ridiculous. This doesn't do anything. This doesn't save the ACC from a valuation standpoint. In fact, it might even devalue it because you would be losing the Atlanta television market and you would kick out 5 teams. So the amount of inventory ESPN would be paying for would be less. I don't know how that would then translate to more money being directed towards Clemson, because the nature of Florida State and Clemson wanting out of the ACC is we're not getting enough money. We can't be competitive. We need to be in one of the Power 2 conferences. Shrinking your conference to that extent, like the idea in theory of cutting what you perceive to be dead weight is understandable. I just don't know why 5 schools is the answer. And by the way, kicking out Stanford, Cal, SMU doesn't really do anything because they're not taking that much money out of the media rights contract. SMU's taking 0, and Stanford and Cal are taking a dramatically reduced share. So That's not really accomplishing a whole heck of a lot. But ESPN and their deal with the ACC, they're paying for the conference's media rights. They pay for inventory to have a certain number of games. Well, if you just take out the number of games, the deal wouldn't be worth as much. I hate to break it to this individual if he's listening to or watching the show, but if the league only had 4 teams, it would not have the same valuation as it does with the rest of the teams. Now, there is a line to walk, and the Big 12 has, demonstrated this, and other conferences have certainly as well, that if you start adding too many, hence I think why the Big 12 has not added Oregon State and Washington State, or perhaps others at this time, if you add too many schools, then your payouts get reduced on a per school basis because not every school is additive from a media valuation standpoint. I understand that. But just kicking 5 schools out of the league? You'd go down to 9 member institutions if you just didn't bring along Stanford, Cal, and SMU. How's that solving anything? How does that make the ACC a more appealing place to be? You would suddenly be on the precipice of not having the 8-team threshold required by the NCAA to even have a conference. So that's the first reason I find this ridiculous. The second reason I find this ridiculous is if you remove the number of teams in your league, you are removing the opportunity for those teams to become something that strengthens your league. Because a conference that only has Florida State, UNC, NC State, and Clemson as legitimate football teams, that's not enough. You can't bank on those schools being great year after year after year. College sports and athletics are cyclical. If you're saying your conference isn't valued enough because it isn't strong enough compared to the Big Ten or the SEC, I hear that argument. Nobody is the Big Ten or the SEC. Kicking schools out, this is not the solution. Too much damage and carnage in the realignment space has already been done and could continue to be done if things progress in a way that leave schools behind. But perpetuating this notion that the solution is, well, let's just kick people out. Let's just leave them behind. You're not solving anything. You still have the exact same problem. Jerry Seinfeld has this hilarious bit from an older stand-up of his where he's talking about horses and how the horses must be confused in a horse race because at the end they have to be panting going, what was the point of that? We were just here. That was the longest possible route you could have taken to get back to the exact same spot you are now. That's what kicking out those 5 schools would be doing. So I'll stick up for any of those institutions and say, look, not everyone can be or is a football power. That's okay. It's okay. They might only have a great season once every 10 years. Don't worry about it too much. You're going to have the same problem if you try and perpetuate this. So that's why I find that to be a ridiculous notion, hence the discussion. We need to discuss Arizona State, and we will, and Boise State as well. That's all coming up next. This episode is brought to you by our friends at LinkedIn Jobs. When you're hiring for your small business, you want to find quality candidates that are right for the role. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs has the tools to help find the right professionals for your team faster and for free, which is a really, really good price. LinkedIn isn't just a job board. LinkedIn helps you hire professionals that you can't find anywhere else, even those who aren't actively searching for a new job, but might be open to that perfect role in a given month. Over 70% of LinkedIn users don't even visit other leading job sites. So if you're not looking on LinkedIn, you're looking in the wrong place. Simple as that. On LinkedIn, 86% of small businesses, 86% get a qualified candidate within 24 hours. Hire professionals like a professional on LinkedIn. 2.5 million small businesses use LinkedIn for hiring with good reason. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. That's linkedin.com/lockedoncollege to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. No more Jaden Rashada in Tempe. Is that going to work out for Arizona State? That's Richie Bradshaw, Locked On Sun Devils, joining me here on the show. What do you expect in year 2 from Kenny Dillingham's team?
More than anything, the one constant that you have at Arizona State
is wanting to see the program increase the standard that they have, and that you want to see that the culture is continuing to really take effect and soil itself in. So with Kenny Dillingham, you want to continue to see these guys just play a little bit harder, being able to buy in, finding ways to show that they are taking in the things that Dillingham is putting out there and applying it on the field. And you saw that last year. You saw that this team was more dialed in than the years previous. You were seeing that these Sun Devils are playing with more passion than they have previously. And they're playing with a bit of adversity too, especially when you consider that Jaden Rashada is gone from the program. Elijah Badger is gone from the program. You're losing some of your best players. So you want to see almost that next man up philosophy that is tired and true formula that we've heard since the dawn of time, it feels. But you just want to see that these guys are going to continue pressing forward, facing that adversity, playing up to the standard that is getting raised a little bit every year.
A few months ago, an outsider might have looked at Arizona State and said, well, Jaden Rashada's got to be poised for a year two leap. He's got Kenny Dillingham back. He's, got Elijah Badger, and those guys, as you mentioned, are no longer with the program. So going into the Big 12 for Arizona State's first season in the new look league, I think the Big 12 is the deepest quarterback conference in all of college football. What is Arizona State's plan at the position without Rashada?
Right now, you've got Sam Leavitt. And Leavitt was a 4-star recruit from the same cycle as Jaden Rashada. He played 4 games in Michigan State, opted to enter the transfer portal, came to Arizona State. And Spencer, he won the job during spring ball, which was part of the reason, if not the biggest reason, that Rashada decided to enter the transfer portal. This is not speculation. This is fact. So Leavitt looks solid. Leavitt is a very quality quarterback. He's somebody that has a little bit of Rashada to his game. Is the ceiling as high? I don't know. But he is able to roll around the pocket. He may not be that dual threat, but he is a mobile quarterback. He's somebody that is able to manipulate the pocket, get outside, make those off-script throws. He's got a good arm. He's somebody that fits what Kenny Dillingham is looking for at the quarterback position very well. So now it's a matter of seeing that he's able to, play up to the billing that he has as a 4-star kid. For what it's worth, Rashada only played 3 games last year, and Leavitt played 4 games. So you have the same sample size, essentially, with Leavitt that you did Rashada. Rashada definitely the higher ceiling. I mean, there's a reason why he was a borderline 5-star recruit coming out of Pittsburgh. But this is nonetheless a talented quarterback and somebody that you were looking forward to taking that step forward for you. And you've got the depth, like Trenton Bourguet is there. Is he great? No, but he's a very serviceable quarterback, and he's somebody that the fan base absolutely adores. They've got somebody behind Sam Leavitt that is going to be able to guide him forward. So I like where they're at, but of course, like you said, Big 12 is just so unbelievably stacked at quarterback. You got Cameron Rising, Noah Fifita, Jalen Daniels, excuse me. This is not exactly a conference that is lacking at the position. So Leavitt definitely going to be behind the 8 ball considering everyone he's going to be competing against. But I do think that there's an opportunity there for him to really strut his stuff as long as he's able to continue building forward from the momentum that he started building in spring ball.
A couple of things that you said there. Jaden Rashada is from Pittsburgh, California. Some are saying the premier Pittsburgh of the United States. Secondly, I kind of forgot what the second one was, but you know what? Oh, I remember now. The old Freudian slip of throwing Jaden Daniels' name into the ether, and Richie is now begging me mentally. He is sending me brainwaves to change the subject, so I will. As you look at this Big 12 conference and where Arizona State can fit in, their win total, according to our friends at FanDuel, is 4.5. I thought last year a 3-9 season in a much stronger Pac-12. You're not making an easy leap because Arizona State's trying to go forward. It's not as good as the league they were in last year. It's still a very, very deep conference. It's going to be the most competitive conference championship race, I think, in the country, because you have the most number of teams that could realistically win it. Can Arizona State be a bowl team this year? Like, do you think that is feasible given the landscape of the league right now? And as you mentioned, kind of the quarterback deficit they might be facing most weeks.
Yes. This is a team that should have bowl game expectations. Look, last year they won 3 games. There were 3 other games that were toss-ups between Washington, who went to the national championship game, Spencer, Colorado.
I still don't know how that works. That was on the road too. That game was in Seattle. ASU, 3-9 ASU. That was the last Pac-12 team to beat Washington. Had Washington on the ropes. Some things cannot be explained. That's why college football is great. Anyway, continue.
No, but you potentially and probably should have beat Washington. If you had the health to be able to kick field goals, you win that game. Colorado was a toss-up. Cal was a toss-up. Oklahoma State was a toss-up. I mean, you win 3 of those 4, you're a 6-6 team. Are you going bowling? No, because Ray Anderson gave you that self-imposed bowl ban. But this was still a team that was right there on the 6-win, 7-win margin, I guess. You're going to the Big 12. This is another difficult year. You have to play Arizona, Utah, Kansas State. You've got Kansas on your schedule. Mississippi State's coming to town. Like,
those are the top 4 odds teams to win the Big 12 championship, by the way. Utah, Kansas State, Kansas, and Arizona. Now, I'm not as high on Arizona as some others are, but everybody else, yeah, I'm all in on those teams as conference title contenders.
Yep, 3 of them are on the road. So this is not going to be an easy game. Oklahoma State, also a game. You have to go to Stillwater for that one. So
that's probably the 5th most likely team to win the Big 12.
Yep, Arizona State has a very difficult schedule. But the thing is, Spencer, sometimes it's not about who the most talented team is. It's about the team that wants it the most. And last year, you saw from the Sun Devils that they wanted it more than they wanted it in years, Spencer. This is a team that believes in the vision that Kenny Dillingham has. And they are better than they were last year. So, sure, they're going up against 5 of the best teams in the Pac-12, in the Big 12. This is a very difficult situation that they're being placed in. But with the way that they play and with the talent that they've been able to add, who knows? Maybe you win 2 of those games. Maybe you get 1 game, like 1-4 against the top 5 teams in the conference coming off a 3-win season. I'm sorry, that's a win for Arizona State. There's going to be a lot of odds makers who are going to have you go 0-5. But bottom line, yes, this is a team that should have bowl expectations for themselves. This is a team that could have been there last year, if not for a couple of different outside factors. This is a team that is more talented. They're more dialed in. You're in year 2 of Kenny Dillingham. I think that they should be able to do it. And they're facing a lot of adversity. You lose Rashada, you lose Badger. This is a team that a lot of people are going to sleep on. There's plenty of reason and very realistic reason, Spencer, why a lot of people are going to go into this year and assume that Arizona State is not only going to be a bottom feeder of the Big 12, but one of the worst Power 5 teams in the country. Totally understandable. But I think from a mindset standpoint, ASU should be able to get to 6 wins. But again, it's all about actually putting that together.
Yeah, Brian Ward, the defensive coordinator. I love that
him.
hire when Kenny Dillingham made it, and I think that's a name that Big 12 fans have got to be aware of, is when you play ASU, you might not see a whole bunch of composite talent according to 24/7 Sports all over the place, but Brian Ward is sharp. So is Richie Bradshaw, Locked on Sun Devils. You check him out on YouTube and wherever you get your podcast. Richie, thank you as always.
It's my pleasure.
Boise State is pushing for that Group of 5 playoff spot. What's the most important game for them to accomplish that? That's coming up next. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Summertime means baseball, which I'm a big fan of. The NBA Finals, I'm also a fan of that, and more. And you can bet it all on FanDuel. You can bet golf over there. You can bet college football over there. Right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $200. You can use to bet on everything from the finals MVP to who's going to hit one out of the park, and everything you could possibly want for college football is over there on FanDuel. You've got games, you've got win totals, conference title odds, national championship odds, odds to make the playoff, odds to miss the playoff. Everything you could want is there. So go check them out. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and add a big win to your summer bucket list. FanDuel.com/lockedon. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook and our official sportsbook sponsor here at the Locked On Network. So lately I've been going through and evaluating the biggest, most important game on the schedule of various teams. If you want me to break a particular team down, just shoot me a note on YouTube or on X, formerly known as Twitter. Let's talk about Boise State. This is one of the teams that you could very well see in the 12-team playoff this year. As I remind you, and my everydayers out there are well aware of this, a group of 5 team is making the playoff. I just feel the need to repeat that until everybody really understands it. Because I think it's something that you can kind of project out into the future in the back of your mind. Oh, yeah, one day they could. Cincinnati did it. There is going to be a group of 5 champion. It's just a matter of who. It's not a matter of if. It used to be a matter of if. Now it's just a matter of who. So Boise State is a sizable favorite in the Mountain West. Their win total has been bumped up to 9.5. And whether or not they make the playoff, I think Washington State is their most important game. They play both Pac-12 teams, Oregon State and Washington State. They get both of them at home. Washington State earlier in the year, Oregon State later in the year. Here's why Washington State matters more. Boise State's first 3 games are not a cakewalk. They start at Georgia Southern. Just don't sleep on that game. I have watched programs in a bigger conference than Boise State before go into Georgia Southern and walk out a loser. Do not. That's not the easiest starting game. Their cupcake game, if you will, against an FCS opponent is Portland State in week 3. That's the first time they come at home because week 2, they go at Oregon. I do not see them beating Oregon at Autzen Stadium. We'll get an idea of what kind of fight they can put up against high-level teams because Oregon's going to be a high-level team this year. But then they come back home against Portland State, and if they've beaten Georgia Southern already, then you play Washington State, who are expected to be a good football team this year. I have sneaky high hopes for the Cougs as they play out their Mountain West adjacent schedule. They also play a really entertaining game in their non-conference slate against Texas Tech. They also play what is now a non-conference game in the Apple Cup against Washington. I don't think it's crazy to suggest that's a neutral site game in Seattle at Lumen Field. I don't think it's crazy to suggest Washington State could win that game. It's going to be more of a home game for the Huskies than the Cougs, but they're going to have a chance. They're going to have a chance. But Boise State at home has to beat Washington State in that game. Because if you're thinking about how a group of 5 team gets a team into the playoff, there are a number of different options. Number 1, you can go the Liberty route. If you just go undefeated in whatever conference you are in, pretty good chance you wind up being the group of 5 champion that gets in. Remember, Air Force a year ago was seen as an outside playoff dark horse when they were 7-0. That was in the 4-team era. We've got an automatic G5 playoff berth now. So if you're going undefeated, I don't know that it matters what group of 5 conference you're in. You could be in the MAC for all we know. But Conference USA would certainly get there. Liberty would have been the playoff team a year ago. An American Conference team, yes, certainly. Mountain West, oh yes, absolutely they would. So if you go undefeated, that is one route. But that's not as likely. That doesn't happen as often as you think. There's the UCF. There's the Liberty that pops up every now and then. But if you just look at those 2 teams, which to my recollection are the last 2 to go undefeated over the course of an entire regular season, that only happens about once every 5 years or so. And I'd be hard-pressed to see it happening again this year. Not impossible, but it's going to be hard. So if you accept that premise, the next logical question for how a group of 5 team gets into the playoff is, well, how many losses can you have? That depends very much, when you're a group of 5 team, on how tough your schedule is. This is a pretty darn good schedule for Boise State. It is a quality schedule to have Oregon on it. And if that's one of your losses, that's not going to be held against you in a major way if Oregon plays the way that they're capable of this year. But you've got Washington State and Oregon State on the schedule at home. Oregon State to end the regular season, And Washington State is their first home game against an opponent of similar caliber. So the reason I say that Wazoo game is going to decide whether or not Boise State gets into the playoff is if you put that loss against Oregon on the road in the loss column, having 2 losses through your first 4 games makes it an uphill battle to climb your way up the rankings, to outrank other Group of 5 conference champions, whether that's a team from the American or Conference USA or the Sun Belt, whoever it is. You face an uphill battle if you put a second loss in the non-conference slate on your resume early on. Because expecting yourself to go undefeated in league play, I just don't think is that reasonable. They've got a couple of tough games. They have to go at UNLV, who are top 3 in the conference title odds. They have to go at San Jose State. That's not the toughest road game in the world. They got a new head coach in there. Who knows what kind of tricks could be pulled out. They have to go at Wyoming. Those road games in conference, they play at Hawaii as well. I don't know that Hawaii and San Jose State pose the same sort of challenge that UNLV and Wyoming do, but I know that UNLV and Wyoming can pose a legitimate threat. Wyoming, new head coach, great environment, typically great on their home field. They've pulled upsets over the years, most recently Texas Tech a season ago. And UNLV, one of the better overall teams. They've got a new quarterback over there, but a capable one for Barry Odom and company, and Brendan Marion, their go-go offensive coordinator. So I don't know that Boise State can get through this conference slate unbeaten. It's just asking a lot. You don't see it very often in any conference at any level, FCS, Group of 5, Power 4, SEC, wherever. It's a difficult thing to ask. And so that's why that Washington State game is so very critical, because you've got to be able to, number one, put a quality win on your resume, but number two, you got to keep a 1 in the loss column for as long as you can. Because if you were to lose to Washington State but beat Oregon State, well, that's going to give you probably 3 losses on the year. Yeah, you'd have a chance, but we all know that late season losses are far more punitive. In this instance, I don't think it would be. I think it'd be less punitive, because what Boise State could have is a situation in which, let's say they beat Washington State, but then they lose to Oregon State, but they've secured a spot in the Mountain West Conference championship game. Well, you can rebound really quickly and get back that loss in a big game. When are you going to then play a game after Washington State that does as much for you credibility-wise, resume-wise, strength of schedule-wise as playing the Cougs does? The answer is probably UNLV, but that's not until 3 weeks later. So I think you are more likely to suffer that kind of ranking. Certainly both games are big. I mean, both Pac-12 games there for Washington State are absolutely massive, because if you beat if they beat both those teams, you can see Boise State at 11-2, where they've got 1 conference loss to either UNLV or Wyoming. They clean up everybody else. They pick up wins against Oregon State, Washington State, lose to Oregon. Boy, that team is, I think, almost a lock to make the college football playoff, because you'd be hard-pressed to find a Group of 5 team that can beat that sort of resume. Now, if someone like a Liberty or a James Madison goes undefeated, or if Memphis has a great season in the American, it's certainly not a lock. And this is going to be a compelling storyline over the course of the season, but far be it from me to overlook the Group of 5 when they have an auto bid. Whether or not I think they should have one is irrelevant. The fact is they do. And if Boise State wants to get there, that Wazoo game, absolutely critical, because they'll already have 1 loss on the resume against Oregon. Appreciate everyone listening. I will see you next time. And until then, hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.